Welcome inside this midweek edition of Big Ten Today, presented by Old National Bank. I'm your host, Rick Pizzo. Dave Wanstead will join me shortly to look back on last week's NFL Draft, tell you which chosen Big Ten players may have landed in the perfect NFL situations. Also excited to welcome a couple of head coaches into the show. Maryland baseball head man Rob Vaughn, Terps now in first place in the Big Ten. And the head coach of the Illini women's golf team, Renee, Slone, just about a week and a half removed from the program's first ever Big Ten tournament team title. But we begin with today's big story. It is the eve of the Big Ten Lacrosse tournament. On both the men's and women's side, we have reached the semifinal stages. On the women's side, it's Northwestern, the top overall seed and one of the favorites to win the national title as well, taking on Michigan in the first semi, Maryland and Rutgers, your nightcap. Note the start times. The women's games are the second half of Thursday's action. The men actually get us started on Thursday afternoon at 1 Eastern. It's Penn State, the number one seed, taking on Michigan. Johns Hopkins and Maryland, once again, the greatest rivalry in men's college lacrosse, this time in the postseason, Thursday right around 3:30 Eastern. And, of course, all those games are right here on the Big Ten Network. And for us to break it all down, welcome in Big Ten lacrosse analyst Mark Dixon. Mark, let's start on the men's side because that's where we start chronologically. Right around 1 o'clock Eastern, the first semi is top seed Penn State and Michigan. Yes, Penn State's the top seed, but you look back at their regular season matchup, and the Nittany Lions had to outscore the Wolverines 5-0 in the fourth quarter to win that game. What should we be watching for in the rematch?
Well, I mean, what a great game to kick off the Big Ten men's lacrosse tournament. Penn State, what a story. 3-11 a year ago, now sitting at 10-3, and Michigan winning 2 games against their arch rival, Ohio State, in successive weeks to get to this semifinal. I think you're going to want to pay attention, Rick, initially at the face-off dot. Justin Wheatfeld and Nick Rowlett are a great 1-2 punch for the Wolverines that get an offense a lot of possession. So how will Penn State monitor the face-off situation? How will they compete at the face-off dot? And then you have to look at the respective offenses. Penn State has the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year in TJ Malone. They also have some other really good scorers. Kevin Winkoff is one of them. Matt and Jack Trainer, the brothers, do such a great job. How will Michigan defend the Penn State Nittany Lions? And then on the other side, how will Penn State defend Michigan? Michigan has the big three. Mikey Boehm, Josh Sawada, and Ryan Cohen. Each of them have over 40 points on the season. Penn State has the specialist of the year in goaltender Jack Frassion. So this will be a tremendous matchup. You mentioned Michigan forfeiting a lead late in that game. They controlled that game in Ann Arbor for 45 minutes. And Kevin Conry told us this week they have to play 60 minutes of lacrosse to get this one done.
Mark, that winner moves on to face the winner of Johns Hopkins and Maryland. Those teams met in the regular season finale less than 2 weeks ago. And, of course, plenty of drama when these two teams get together. A lot different, though, than maybe in recent years when Maryland had some dominance. This time it was Hopkins winning by a single goal. Should we expect the same kind of drama on Thursday afternoon?
I think it's going to be very dramatic. I think it's going to be a terrific ball game. You think about, again, a year ago, Maryland destroyed Hopkins on Homewood Field 22-7 in a game that wasn't even that close. And then you fast forward to a couple weeks ago in College Park, Johns Hopkins able to win the rivalry, win the Big Crab Trophy by a goal. So this Blue Jay program has made leaps and bounds in the year time, but this is still Maryland, the defending national champions. They would like nothing better than to beat the Blue Jays on their home turf once again.
Mark, has this year, both inside the Big Ten and maybe nationally, been as unpredictable as any year that we can remember in men's lacrosse?
It actually is falling kind of to script a little bit. When you look at the national rankings, Notre Dame, Duke, Virginia have kind of separated themselves as the top three. But then the Big Ten, it has been as competitive as ever. At this point in the season, I believe Maryland, Penn State, Johns Hopkins are locks for the NCAA tournament. All three of them could be seeded. But when you look at a program like Michigan, they take the next step, hosting their first ever Big Ten tournament game, winning their first ever Big Ten tournament game at home, advancing to the semifinals for the second time in program history. You do have some other things. The Ivy League isn't as strong this year as they were a year ago. The Big East is incredibly strong. And Bill Tierney, the head coach at Denver, his final season as a collegiate head coach. He's won 7 national championships. So I think that this season hasn't been as unpredictable as others. But the one thing that sticks out to me, Rick, is the competitiveness from top to bottom of the Big Ten. All 6 teams at various points of the season were ranked, and all of them have been incredibly tough outs. As I mentioned, 3 of those teams in Penn State, Maryland, and Johns Hopkins locks for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, maybe parity, probably a better description than unpredictable as far as 2023 is concerned. All right, Mark, let's go to the women's side, where Northwestern is the clear favorite. The Wildcats are playing so well right now. They will take on Michigan in this semifinal with 16-8 in the regular season. What makes Northwestern so dangerous, and how, if Michigan has any chance, can they hang around?
Well, you start with the Skane train, and that is Izzy Skane, the incredible scorer for the Northwestern Wildcats. She missed last year with an ACL injury. Her return to the lineup has just been incredible for an already very talented Northwestern team. Then you have Sammy White on the defensive end. She is electric. She is terrific. And you also have the bad taste in their mouths of last year's national semifinals, where they led the entire game and then at the end fell in that national semifinal game. So you put those 3 things together with an already really talented team, that spells trouble for the Michigan Wolverines. And look, right now, Hannah Nielsen's team, they're playing with house money. They beat Penn State last weekend in the quarterfinals. This is a tough team. And let's not forget, Hannah Nielsen is a Northwestern graduate, won many national championships under the leadership of Kelly and Monty Hiller. She knows this program very, very well. She's going to take that knowledge and her coaching and the drive of this Michigan team to try to get the job done in the semifinals.
It's funny because on the other semifinal, it's another rematch with a fairly heavily favored team that also won 16-8, exact same score during the regular season. How do you see that second semi playing out on the women's side?
Rutgers is a team that made the NCAA tournament a year ago under Melissa Lehman for the first time, and they got off to a slow start in 2023, but they've really picked it up as of late. Upset Johns Hopkins on the road last week to get to this semifinal game, and prior to that, knocked off nationally ranked Stony Brook. So this is a Scarlet Knight team that's playing with a ton of confidence, and this senior class, this is the class that Melissa Lehman said would lead them to the next level. Megan Ball and Cardello and Cassidy Spillis, players like that. But Maryland, much like the men, they're still Maryland. And Shea Ahern is one of the best draw takers, not just in the conference, but in the country. Libby May, Eloise Clevenger on the offensive end. Then you've got Abby Bosco and Emily Sterling manning a defense that is top-notch in the game of women's lacrosse. This will be a terrific matchup between 2 teams that met earlier in the year. You mentioned the 16-8 score. I think this is a much more competitive game between Rutgers and Maryland this time around, and really, a game that could go either way.
Great stuff, as always. If you need to know something about Big Ten lacrosse nationally, whether it's this year, whether it's 20 years ago, you go no further than Mark Dixon. Mark, we appreciate your time, as always. Know you're going to be a busy guy this coming weekend. Enjoy all the calls and all the action this coming weekend at the Big Ten lacrosse tournaments.
Always great to talk to you, Rick. Thanks so much for having me, and can't wait for tomorrow.
Also, the official sponsor of the Big Stat, Big Ten had 55 total players taken in this year's NFL draft. Big Ten and the SEC continue to dominate, not just on the field, but in the draft room as well. Those leagues basically doubling the combined draft selections from the ACC and the Big 12. And as for the Big Ten specifically, this was a record year, breaking the previous mark set all the way back in 1973. The Common Draft era began in 1967. In 73, there were 52 Big Ten draft picks. In 2023, there were 55. And with all those numbers now fresh in your head, welcoming another number genius, Dave Wanstead, to the show. Hey, Dave, why right now is the Big Ten producing so many pros?
Well, I'm going to start with coaching. I mean, the coaches are doing a great job of developing these players. I mean, the NFL people will not take a chance on very many players just on talent. In other words, we want to see it on film. We want to see you make that block. We want to see you make that catch. And I think the coaches in the Big Ten right now, sure, they're recruiting good players, but then they're developing to the point where that's the result.
All right, so one of those players who obviously developed during his time at Ohio State was C.J. Stroud, taken number 2 overall by the Texans. Forget about all that talk that we heard leading up to the draft. He could fall. Will Levis could be the 2nd overall pick. It's C.J. Stroud, and you love the position that he's in Houston.
I do. I think it's a great fit. I mean, there were rumors after his workout that he was going to be the first player taken in the draft. And, you know, I know the big rap was the test score. Oh, did he score high enough on the test score? That test score is something, sure, you take a look at it, and any type of those measurement things. But at the end of the day, it comes down to watching the tape. How does this player react under pressure in big games? If Georgia doesn't call the timeout, think about this, in that championship game, Ohio State's going to win that. 9 minutes left in the game. They're up by 11, and he's going to win a national championship. There's no question about that, you know, because of the fake punt. I mean, it was good. They were going to run him out of the stadium, in my opinion. But 7 touchdowns to 1 interception. Big guy. We saw he can run. He's an athlete if he's got to move.
Yeah, I think he answered those questions against Georgia, maybe against Michigan as well. I know they lost both those games, but he showed that he can win games with his legs, or at least put his team in position to win games with his legs if he absolutely has to, and that's becoming more and more commonplace in the NFL. 3 picks later, we saw Devin Witherspoon. That Illini secondary was so good a year ago, and Witherspoon is chosen 5th overall by Seattle. I think folks believe he is going to be an immediate impact guy with the Seahawks. No
question. I mean, I had a long talk with Rondé Barber, the Hall of Fame corner from Tampa Bay Bucks, and we were talking about the 2 or 3 top corners, and it was a consensus that we'd liked Witherspoon. And what Devin brings to the table is, obviously, you got the number 1 defense, so you played at a high level all year at Illinois. But he's a complete corner. Some of these guys are just big guys. They can't really cover or make plays on the ball. Other guys just want to be cover guys, and they don't want to hit anybody. This guy has tackles he's as physical as he is a cover guy. And I tell you what, and I said this to several people, if you're one of those wide receiver diva guys and you're going to line up and play against him, you better be ready emotionally and physically every play, because he's coming after you. I love this guy.
Some of the corners have gotten a lot bigger. He's not a really big corner, but every coach or scout or GM you talk to say maybe he weighs 180. He plays like he's 200.
Exactly.
And he is as fast as a guy who is 180. That's a pretty good combination. Now, there was some head scratching going on when Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Detroit Lions, called Jack Campbell, the Iowa linebacker, and said, I want to take you. I love your game. I love your last name. But 18th overall is much higher than many people projected. Campbell, you like this pick.
I do. I mean, I'm a fan. I mean, when you look, it's all about production, okay? And maybe some people thought he was too big to be a linebacker.
He's huge.
Right? He's 6'5", 250, but then you look at his combine numbers, and he ran in the 4.5, 4.6, 4.5. And here's production. We used to always, I remember sitting there with Jimmy Johnson, we'd sit there and say, okay, this is his combine numbers. Let's look at his production. This guy has interceptions. This guy has sacks. This guy has tackles. This guy is a linebacker. He'll be up there with Dan Campbell, say, chewing on kneecaps. He might be too smart for that, being an All-American Big Ten guy. But he's going to be up. He's going to be a perfect fit for Detroit. And Chris Spielman, the old Ohio State linebacker,
he's a legend.
He's in the front office up there, and I know for a fact he loves Dan.
I'm a little disappointed. It took almost 4 minutes to get the first Jimmy Johnson reference of the day. I didn't think it would take that long when we're talking about the NFL draft.
I got some stories if we got time.
I bet you do. Hopefully we'll have some time for some of those stories as well. It's hard sometimes, Dave, to really quantify the importance of interior defensive linemen, because you talk about production and you can't really worry about stats, because stats don't necessarily ring true for a guy like Michigan's Mozzie Smith. He goes in the first round, and he goes to the Cowboys, a team that has produced some really good defensive linemen over the years. What do you like about this marriage?
Well, this one surprised me a little bit, I'll be honest with you. But then talking to people down at Dallas, the scheme that they used, Dan Quinn, the old Atlanta coach, is the defense coordinator, and the Cowboys blitzed more than any team in the NFL last year. So when you're blitzing linebackers and blitzing safeties, all your defensive linemen, they don't really have to be great pass rushers. If you're only rushing 4, they better be great pass rushers. But if you're bringing 6 or 7, you don't have to be. And that's what I think that Massey brings to the table is that he's a big, strong, physical. He's a run defender. They want to stop the run. And he can grab people and play gaps and really open up those lanes for the blitzers to come. So he's a good fit for what the Cowboys do today on defense.
It's got to be very different, though, if you're a defensive lineman, when you join the NFL and every single guy that you are dealing with on the opposing offensive line is 310, 320, and they're as fast and as athletic as the most athletic guys that you faced in college.
Absolutely.
It's a step up.
A big-time step up, and you'll find that out real quick.
Yep. To the beginning of the second round, Joey Porter obviously was disappointed not to be a first-round pick, but if you were going to say, well, you're not going to go until the second round, but you're going to go just down the road to Pittsburgh to an organization that is considered by many to still be one of the premier organizations in the NFL that takes care of its players, does everything right in developing them. That's where Joey Porter landed.
Absolutely. And with his father, senior, having played there and coached there, I mean, there were pictures leading up to the draft because there was a lot of rumors that the Steelers were going to take him with the first pick. And there was pictures of him being on the sideline when he was 10 years old with his dad.
Isn't that great?
I mean, you talk about a history. And, I said Dan Campbell may be too big and some people were a little bit shy. Well, that was the conversations that I heard about Joey Porter. Okay, he's a 6'3" corner and he doesn't run 4.2. But I'll tell you what, in my opinion, you can move him to safety because he will hit you. He's a smart guy. He's a leader. He's high character. The Steelers are doing backflips. Trust me. They are so excited to get him. He could play nickel, corner, or safety. I think there's a lot of flexibility to what Joey brings to the table.
Hey, listen, all the years that you spent as a defensive coordinator, let's explain the importance of guys that can step in right away and be in that secondary. I know the linebackers and the guys who get all the sacks, they may get more of the attention, but those guys in the defensive backfield, they often set the tone. They are in charge of everything that goes on in front of them for that 15 or 20 yards.
Well, a defensive lineman and a linebacker can make a mistake. They can bust an assignment. They can fall down, okay, and all of a sudden, who's going to have to make the play? The defensive backfield, right? We know that. That's common sense. So when they draft these defensive linemen, it's a trust thing. You got to have guys that can make plays, but you got to have guys, hey, if they can't handle it back there and they can't deal with the pressure and what's going on, they're going to give up touchdowns. And I think that's what Joey brings to the table. It really does.
Our last guy you want to touch on, and I'm shocked by this, we're going kicker.
Yes.
With Michigan's Jake Moody. Why are we talking kickers?
Because you know what? As a coach, trust me on this. No one gives the kickers enough loving until you need them. And no one ever talks about them unless they miss a kick. So they deserve some attention, and particularly when you're the first kicker drafted, okay? Yep. And that's what Jake was. I mean, we know that he was a great kicker in college. We know all the awards that he won. But now he got rewarded for it. And they recognize that. The ironic thing is the guy whose place he's taken, right, Robbie Gould, the old Bear,
Penn State guy.
Penn State, another Big Ten guy. So Shanahan and those guys at the 49ers, they love Big Ten kickers.
All right, we got about maybe a minute for story time. What's your draft story?
Well, there's a lot of trades. They're talking about more trades this year than ever
Every
before.
pick seemed to be a trade.
Every pick. Well, our first 5 years at the Cowboys, we had 51 trades. That was as many trades, more trades than the entire NFL made in that 5-year period. One great story. You don't know how things are going to happen. We're sitting at number 18. This is in 91. And Detroit, Wayne Fonts, okay, we wanted to get out of our pick. We had 3 number ones. We wanted to move to the second round, get more picks. And Wayne Fonts and Jimmy were longtime friends. And so they make an agreement. Jimmy, they're going to give us compensation. They're going to take our pick at 18 and we're moving out. Wayne says, I'll get back to you. I got to run it by Mr. Ford, but we're good. All of a sudden, there's 3 minutes on the clock, and I'm sitting there. Jimmy points to me, look at the clock. It's 2 minutes. Calls, is Wayne there? He said, come get Wayne. Wait, we're down to 1 minute on the clock, and Wayne comes on and says, Jimmy, you got my word on this thing, but I can't find Mr. Ford. Jimmy Johnson says, who were you going to draft? I'll draft him for you if I got your word, and then we'll make a trade. He says we were going to take a kid named Pritchard out of Mississippi State. So if you looked at the 1991 draft, number 8, round 18. Now, we took Russell Maryland at number 1. So now all of a sudden, Cowboy fans are excited. Who are they going to take? All of a sudden, Dallas Cowboys draft Pritchard, another defensive lineman, at number 18, and then we made the trade afterwards.
Who'd you get for him? Do you remember?
In the second round, it was probably Emmitt Smith or somebody. You know.
Yeah, I'm sure that's
Troy Aikman.
I already think you're smart. You don't have to try to make yourself any smarter than you are. Making history is generally a good thing, and a week and a half ago, the Illini women's golf team did exactly that for the first time in program history, claiming the Big Ten Tournament Championship, an outstanding performance at Fox Chapel Golf Club just outside of Pittsburgh, bringing that tournament trophy back to Champaign. And that is where we head now for today's big interview. The head coach of the Illini, Renee Slone, is with us. Renee, I know you've heard it a bunch since winning that title about a week and a half ago, but the first time in program history, how long did it take for that to sink in for you and the rest of the team?
I think it's still sinking in for me right now. Just hearing that again, it makes me emotional. It's a very, very special moment for our program and certainly for the team.
And as an alum, someone who played at Illinois, how much more does it add to the knowledge that you helped bring that first ever team title back to the place where you played your college golf?
Well, obviously, I have a very strong connection to the program, to the University of Illinois. This institution means a lot to me, and the opportunities that it has afforded me. So this is definitely a very special moment in my life.
All right, so let's go back to that final round 2 Sundays ago. You're in front by 3 or 4 shots over Northwestern, by 4 or 5 over Ohio State through most of that back 9, but the lead never really gets any bigger. It also never really gets any smaller. And on that golf course, so much could change so quickly. When did you allow it to hit you that you guys were actually going to win this thing?
The final 4 holes on that golf course definitely are challenging, and a lot can transpire over those holes. And our team did a great job of just staying steady, staying consistent, and remaining the course. But as far as for me, I'm not a scoreboard watcher, and so I really didn't know how things were playing out until the 18th hole, after Crystal had hit her approach shot in, and a couple of coaches came over and a great round, great playing, congratulations. And I, at that point still wasn't sure as far as what was going on, and chatted with our assistant coach, Pina Gentile, and she said, as of right now, we're ahead by 4 shots. And I said, wow, okay. And it started to hit me at that point in time.
Renee, I cannot believe that. I have covered a lot of men's and women's tournaments, and every coach seems to be glued to their phone, checking out golf stat to check out every score as it happens. You may be the first coach I've ever heard that says they're trying not to look.
No, I don't want that emotional element to come into play. We talk about our game plan and our strategy with the team, and working our process, and sticking to that, and to really be in the moment, and to not allow other things, other distractions to interfere with that. And so and there have been times where sometimes the information is incorrect, and so we want to just do what we can with what we have at that moment in time.
And so when you didn't have to wait any longer, when the final putt was struck, and it actually wasn't struck by Crystal, she had finished out and one of her playing competitors still had to putt out after her, and the rest of the team is waiting by the 18th green, ready to storm Crystal and celebrate together. What was that moment like as a group?
Well, the team, waiting there very anxiously, wanting the cue to be able to head out to Crystal to celebrate with her. Just a special moment, taking it all in as far as this is really happening. We are achieving something that has never been done before in program history. And then again, the round that Crystal had that day was just one for the ages.
It most certainly was. She shoots 62. No other player in the field all week long in any of the 3 rounds shoots better than 68. She's 9 under par, 9 birdies, no bogeys. Really didn't even come close to making a bogey in that final round. And this is with the wind blowing at some 15-20 through most of the day. How do you describe just how good the round she played truly was?
Like you mentioned, the conditions just added a whole nother element to it. We got to experience a wide range of weather conditions throughout the 3 days, but cooler temperatures down into the 40s, and like you said, a nice breeze blowing as well. And she just managed herself beautifully. Golfed her ball, went about her business, and made it look very easy.
She did, which is really hard to do on that golf course in even ideal conditions. You look at where some of the pins were placed on the final day. 14 was playing so long, every player had hybrid into a green that is basically bisected by a ridge, and the pin was tucked on the short side of that ridge. If you go left into that bunker, you're dead. Same thing on 17, a really long par 3, and that Biarritz green, it's all the way on the back portion. You had to be so precise with every shot you hit. How hard is it to do that over the course of 5 hours, especially in Crystal's position when she knows she is protecting a lead and trying to bring the team title home at the same time?
Well, I had an exchange with her on the 8th hole during that final round, and something that had never happened before during her 5 years here. And she turns to me and says, "I'm putting really well today." I thought, okay, something special must be going on, because she is not one to make comments like that. And she'd been hitting the ball well all week. First round, she was very frustrated with her putting. She had struck the ball well, I think hit 16 greens in regulation that day, but just not capitalizing on those opportunities. And clearly, she capitalized on quite a few that final round.
Now, you were the last individual champion from the University of Illinois, claiming that title most recently in '93. I'm curious, do the players ever talk to you about your playing career?
There are times that we do chat about that every now and then. Some of the experiences that I have had, and can draw upon that to share with them, and learning how to manage these different situations that we find ourselves in.
All right, did you go back after that championship and tell Coach Small that he and the men's team had to get after it, so you made sure that she had a champagne double after 2 weekends in a row?
I knew Coach Small and the team had things well at hand, so I had every confidence in them.
Yeah, they've certainly done it once or twice before. We talked with Mike on Tuesday. That run's unbelievable. 8 straight Big Ten championships and 13 in the last 14 years. And obviously the focus now for both of your teams, the NCAAs, the regionals have been announced. You're on your way to San Antonio. The NCAAs always such a tough grind. You have to play such good golf, because a bad round in May could mean that your season is over. What's the approach? What's your coaching mentality with this team as you guys get ready to head into the postseason?
Well, continuing to manage ourselves to the best of our abilities, and be in the moment. Keeping ourselves very present, focused, and doing all the little things that we have done throughout the season to help us prepare for this time of year. And being confident in those preparations, and knowing that we've done everything we can, and then just simply going out and enjoying the day, enjoying the process of competing and playing golf, and being in the moment.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think we put so much pressure, so much stress sometimes on these situations. And as you mentioned with Crystal being so calm and talking about her putting in that final round, the importance for your team as you get in this situation of embracing the moment, enjoying the fact that you've reached the NCAA tournament, and while you're trying to play your best, knowing that as long as you do your best, whatever happens is going to happen.
Absolutely. And I think that is one thing we've really tried to emphasize, especially in these last couple of months, because I think sometimes we get so focused on the outcome and on results, and maybe frustrated if things aren't going according to plan, that we lose a little bit of that joy. And this is a game at the end of the day, and we want to enjoy what we're doing. And so really trying to instill that, because it's amazing the things that can happen when you enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, if you're not having fun when you get to play on some of the courses that you guys get to play on, then probably not doing things right, at least some of the time. Renee, Slone, we truly appreciate your time today. Congratulations again on the Big Ten tournament title. Wish you and the team the best of luck in the NCAAs.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We are back on Big Ten Today with a look at the current Big Ten baseball standings. You see Maryland atop the league, 11-4. Michigan State a game behind at 10-5. Reason the Terps are on top, you see Indiana at 9-6. Maryland just went to Bloomington, took 3 from the Hoosiers. Something that had not been done in a decade inside the Big Ten. Nebraska and Michigan, the other two teams at 9-6. And we're thrilled to be joined now by Maryland head coach Rob Vaughn. Hey, Rob, that trip to Indiana and that win marked 20 straight Big Ten series that your team has gone without a loss. 19 wins and 1 weather-affected split among those 20 series. What was that trip home like on Sunday after the third win in Bloomington?
Man, it was good. Obviously, it was just a really good weekend of baseball. You know, I thought we played at a really high level. If I'm being honest, probably the best weekend we played kind of in all 3 phases of the game in the 11 years that I've been here at Maryland. Just a really good effort from our guys. So, you know, I think our guys understand, though, and I think that's the biggest thing you want is it's a great weekend, but we got 3 big weeks ahead. You know, you got a good Nebraska team coming in here. You got Minnesota, who I was just watching video of that can really swing it and play at an elite level, and then Penn State on the road the following weekend. So, you know, I think the guys were obviously feel good about the way we're playing right now, but I think they're mature enough to understand there's a long way left to go in this thing.
You said all 3 phases were on point against Indiana, but I want to start at the plate. You score 43 runs in 3 games. What was the most impressive aspect of your team's approach at the plate?
I think just the consistency of the at-bats is what was really impressive. You know, I mean, you got, you know, Luke Schliger at the top and Nick LaRusso, Matt Shaw. Like those 3 guys, everybody in the country knows, everybody in the conference knows. They're kind of your top 3 at the top there. But I think what impressed me the most is just the consistency of our at-bats throughout the lineup. You know, you had Kevin Keiser had a great weekend. Elijah Lambros had a great weekend. Eddie Akopian continues to swing the bat well. So I think it's just the length of the lineup, you know, and I think, you know, we had some really big innings down there, and that just goes to show a little bit the relentlessness of the way these hitters approach things. You know, early in the year, I feel like we'd get that big swing and score 2 or 3 runs, and then the at-bats kind of shut down a little bit until the next inning. And, man, it's just been a relentless approach offensively the last, you know, couple weeks. And, you know, I think they understand what they're playing for, and they're not ready for this thing to end. But they know we don't have any room for error, so we got to come out and do our thing.
Hey, everybody loves the long ball. Everybody that is, except the opposing pitchers. You guys are second in the nation now in home runs. How much of power hitting is innate? How much of it can be taught?
I mean, I think a lot of it comes with age, to be honest with you. You see a lot of young hitters that if their hand-eye's good, if they strike or if they walk more than they punch, and they do some of these things well, I think power comes as they get older. And we're fortunate to have some older players, Nick LaRusso, and like the guys I referenced earlier, Nicky Lowe, Matt Shaw, and Luke Schliger, just older players, you know, that can really impact the baseball, that have good command of the strike zone. And, you know, we talk about it all the time. We hit some homers, and there's no secret about that, but you know, I don't want our offense to be built around the long ball. And I think that's one thing that we did really well this weekend is, you know, we use boxing terms around here all the time, jab, haymaker, you know, and we did that in a couple of games there where we used the short game to push some runs across, and, you know, you got a safety squeeze, you got a drag bunt down. You did some of those things. And then the pitcher makes a mistake out over the plate, and you lengthen the field by hitting doubles and homers. And we've been able to do that at a pretty high level so far.
You mentioned 3 guys who I know are leaders both on and off the field, and Nick LaRusso, Matt Shaw, Luke Schliger. How do those 3 guys set the tone for everybody else?
I mean, they're the straw that stirs the drink. You know, I mean, Luke is tough as it gets at the top. I mean, his strike zone discipline is elite. His ability to compete with 2 strikes is elite. His fearlessness is elite, and so I think he just sets the tone for the game for us at the top. And, you know, and then whatever order we hit him in, you've got Matt Shaw and Nicky Lowe behind him. And, you know, I've been on the other side. I grew up a catcher, and so I called games my whole career, and I remember plenty of time sitting with Sean McCann back at Kansas State, who was our pitching coach, and him and I are going over opposing lineups and how we're going to attack them. And, you know, I look at what those 3 can do to set the tone at the beginning of the game, and it's just not a fun couple guys to try to navigate. And, you know, and then you got some thunder behind them too, and Ian Petrutt. So, you know, I think it's really mature at bats, it's really professional at bats, and it's some danger at the top there. And those guys have done a great job on this run we've been on the last month or so of really kind of starting the game in a really good manner. And like I said, then as we've done that, those other guys in the lineup have come along, and it's just they're playing at a level where there's not a whole lot of holes in that lineup, and that just can wear on opposing pitching staffs, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah, and they're part of a group that seems to come out of that dugout each and every day. You have 8 position players with at least 38 starts in your 45 games. What has that combination of experience and stability meant to your success?
I think it's huge. I mean, we talked about that. We had a pretty historic season last year, and we navigated the entire season really without one injury, and that's kind of unheard of. That doesn't happen very often, And this year we lost, Matt Shaw to about a week early in the season with a sickness. We lost Matt Woods, had a back issue early, then missed about 3 weeks in concussion protocol late. And then Nick LaRusso goes out of the game about a week and a half ago against Purdue with the hamstring. But fortunately, we were able to get him back in a little bit of an adjusted role, but we're able to get his bat back in the lineup. And I mean, I think you look around college baseball, you can have the right team on paper, but injuries to the wrong guys, it can just really derail your season. And you see that all the time across college athletics. That's why everybody's asking you in, December, January, what do you think of your team? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And man, it's a grind of a season, and the wrong guy gets hurt, the wrong guy goes down. It can really alter your season, especially if you start stacking those on there. And we've been fortunate that when we have had a guy go down, it's been one, and it hasn't been for very long, and we've been able to kind of fill the gap in the meantime. So professional group of guys, and when you have the group that we have, to be able to write their names on the lineup card every day is pretty huge for us.
Rob, I know that on the mound, Jason Savicul has been the lead dog for a while, and while he's having a solid season, he'd be the first to admit he's not quite pitching the way that he did last year when he had one of the better seasons that we've seen on the mound in the Big Ten in a very long time. What can he do to maybe get back to that status over the last month of the season and heading into the postseason?
Yeah, and Jay's really thrown the ball well for the most part. He's had to pick up the slack a little bit because we've had some injuries on the mound. Nick Dean missed a start, so we had to lean on him a little bit heavier. Guys know Jason, and everybody around the country knows Jason, and they know what he's going to try to do to them. And honestly, you look at his game against Indiana. When you look at the final line, you might look up and say, man, he didn't throw the ball very well. He gave up 6 runs, 7 runs, whatever it ended up being. But 5 of those were on 2 swings to one of the best freshman hitters I've ever seen in Devin Taylor. He makes 2 mistakes and both 2 outs. One tries to get a fastball under his hands, which is a tough pitch to execute, but is the only way about to get Devin Taylor out, and leaves it middle, and he hits a 3-run jack and gets to a 3-2 count and goes to the breaking ball and just left it over the plate, and he hits a 2-run jack. So 5 of those 7 were on 2 pitches, and so he's really thrown the ball good. He's just had some hard luck with some mistakes there, but I was really proud of the way he competed last weekend, and the way he controlled his energy, his emotions. That guy just sent it and competed for us, and that's the one thing Jason Savicul is going to do. When he steps on the mound for you, he's going to give you a chance to win. And when his stuff is on, man, there's not a guy better than that. But when he can sink the baseball and mix in the up and down curveball, the harder slider, and then he throws a split finger that when he lands is kind of a game changer. So I really think Jason's going to go on a really good run for us the rest of the way because he's thrown the ball better than his numbers may show, and we just need to keep him rolling with it.
All right, let's finish with the rest of your staff. I know Kyle McCoy had a great outing on Saturday. You mentioned Nick Dean, another one of those kind of inning eaters. How do you feel about the depth coming out of the pen and the rest of the staff, guys like Kenny Lippman, David Falco, and others?
Yeah, and I think that's everybody talks about the offense that we ran out there this weekend because I think we scored 80-something runs last week, considering the midweeks too. So offensively, it was obviously a pretty gaudy weekend, but what gets lost in the shuffle is the starts that we got. And you had an unbelievable start from Nick Dean on Friday night against a potent lineup in Indiana. Followed that up by a really good one out of our freshman superstar, Kyle McCoy. And so that was a big piece. We went into Sunday's game with Jason Savicul on the mound, Kenny Lippman, Dave Falco, Nigel Belgrave hot and ready to go behind him. And you're not guaranteed to win, obviously, by any means in that situation right there. But if you could have told me we were going to go on the road to Indiana and have, arguably our best starter and our 3 best bullpen arms hot and fresh, gosh, man, I'd have taken that in a heartbeat. So those guys have been good. We just need the consistency. John Sheff, my former boss, used to tell me all the time, man, it's hard to win. You don't get a good start. And And we got, two good ones, and then one, which I know he wouldn't consider a good start, but got us some length, and we were able to shorten that game on Sunday. So we got good starts. Kenny Littman's been a weapon for us out of the pen. Dave Falco's, he's just a wily vet, man. That guy's been around a while. He's fearless, and he's got a really good cutter that's just really tough on lefties and righties alike. So he's been outstanding. And then you kind of have the flamethrower in Belgrave on the back end. So, we were down Tommy Kane this last weekend, had a little lat thing going on, but everything's good. So hoping to have him back in the fold again this weekend. So it's going to be a big weekend, man. I know Will Bolton, and I know their coaching staff, and I know how tough Nebraska is going to be this weekend. So we got to do our job against Delaware today, and then we're going to have our hands full for 3 games here at home.
Maryland head coach Rob Vaughn of the first place Terps, Delaware on Wednesday night, and a 3-game set at home against Nebraska. See all 4 of those games on Big Ten Plus. Rob, we appreciate the time. Best of luck, not just tonight and this weekend, but throughout the course of the rest of the regular season, and of course in Omaha at the Big Ten tournament.
Awesome, guys. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Some of the most impactful recent transfer portal news that we've seen has a big impact on Michigan State. Quarterback Peyton Thorne enters the transfer portal, and at basically the same time, the top receiver from a year ago, Keon Coleman, enters the transfer portal. Of course, Jaden Reed was drafted in the second round of the draft as well. So you look at those departures, and there are some empty cupboards for Michigan State offensively. David, just 2 years ago, they had that unbelievable run with Kenneth Walker toting the rock. There's no Walker last year. This team struggles. And now this offense seems to have not just a few, but a lot of holes to fill going into a really tough division.
Yeah, and I don't like the time of it, too. All of a sudden, spring's over, so if you were going to try to bring somebody in or get a freshman and get them some practice reps, that's all over with. So now your next time are legitimately going on the field is training camp, getting ready for the season. That puts a lot of pressure on a coach right now. And I'll tell you what, it's bothersome. Everybody who says, why? How could that happen? Is it just that they don't want to compete? Is that what the situation is with the player, Rick? Or, but the thing you got to be careful of as a coach, you have to be super upfront and honest with these players. Because if you mislead somebody, and now all of a sudden they leave, and that's the reason they give, that's going to affect high school coaches, the parents, the players on your team. I mean, it can be a real mess if it's not handled right. And I think something needs to be tightened up on this whole.
Well, the transfer portal, something's got to be figured out with the dates, because coaches now are basically protecting their players all the way. And spring games, by the way, are probably going to become a thing of the past, because who wants to advertise the best guys that other teams could potentially go out there and get after spring ball? All right, let's turn our attention to Ohio State. The biggest story there, the quarterback competition. C.J. Stroud is gone. It appears to be Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, but we didn't get to see Devin because of the finger injury in the spring game. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I'm not overly concerned about the quarterback situation at Ohio State. I'm not. When you got Marvin Harrison Jr. and you got your running backs coming back, the biggest.
Just throw it up there.
Just no. Yes. Okay. But they got talented guys, and Ryan Day. He has proven that he's excellent at quarterback coach. The area that has to be developed is the offensive line. To me, that's where I would be focused at, because that takes the most time, Rick. These guys can go out by themselves in the offseason, every one of these schools we're talking about, and throw the ball on their own, receivers, quarterbacks. Offensive line can't get it done unless they get those pads on and get out there and practice.
Yeah, and that offensive line didn't look very good during that spring game. Of course, you're replacing 3 starters, center Luke Whippler, guard DeJuan Jones, Paris Johnson as well. He was a top pick in this year's NFL draft. Now, there's been a lot of talk the last couple of years about Ohio State and Michigan, understandably. You look at the roster that James Franklin has, Penn State's going to be a beast.
He does. And they lost a quarterback, and Sean Clifford. I think it was Sean there as long as
about 12
James
years.
Has been there.
Yeah.
He's been there. Yeah. Franklin came in together. No, it seems that way. That's going to be the biggest question mark. Because defensively, I was looking at it this morning. I mean, they got 10 of the 11. They're juniors or seniors with playing time. So Manny Diaz, another year in the system with him developing. To me, it's all going to be about the quarterback, because as much as everybody wanted to criticize Sean Clifford, when they had to have it, he was always the guy.
Yeah, and Drew Aller has a year under his belt, played a lot last year. Yep. There will likely be Bo Prabula in there for probably some packages, maybe similar to what we saw with Tommy Stevens a few years back. So when you look at the East, Who's the favorite before we start the year?
Michigan. It's got to be. Why? Because of quarterback. J.J. McCarthy. I mean, he's the one guy that's solid. Whenever you have your quarterback back, not only does it do a lot for your offense, but does a lot for your team. It right now, Michigan is bringing, they've got the momentum. I remember when I worked with Don Shula, he did say this, and this is when the Dolphins were winning every year, competing for it. He says, it's tougher to stay on top of the mountain than it is to climb it. Right now, Michigan's on top. They've climbed the mountain. Now they've got to find a way to stay
Not just
there.
McCarthy. What about that backfield? Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards. I mean, riches on the offensive side. Quickly, we got about 45 seconds left. That's your favorite in the East. Who's your favorite in what appears to be a wide open West?
I said it's a quarterback league, and we know that how much Kurt Ferentz appreciates quarterbacks, right? I mean, how about Cade McNamara now as the quarterback at Iowa? I mean, this could change. You know that they're going to run the ball. Last year they had some injuries at running back. You know they're going to play great defense. They got a lot of guys coming back. Now all of a sudden you add a veteran quarterback, tight end. You say Sam Laporta's gone. Well, guess what? A tight end came with him. Help me out here.
Well,
Eric All.
Eric All from Michigan.
From Michigan transfers with them. So they got a couple tight ends there. To me, a veteran quarterback that can play and is a winner makes all the difference in the world.
Does this have anything to do with Kirk being a Pittsburgh guy?
Well, coach, he wins.
Coach!
I got his record right here. You ever look at his record?
Many times. That's it for this edition of Big Ten Today. How much fun is this guy?